Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo! I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. On today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Andy Kamenetzky of Locked On Lakers, one half of the Cambros. I always joke, the better half, the better looking half, the smarter half, whatever you want to say.
What's the joke? I don't get what the joke is, Jovan. Like,
I think we've had this interaction the last three times you've been on my show. We've had this exact dynamic to start, and I enjoy the bit every time. But today's going to be a test of our friendship because we are not doing one thing today. We're not doing two things today. We're doing three things today. So first, we are doing this show. Then we're going to go to Spectrum and do the Lake Show podcast for them. And then we're going to do our segment on Spectrum Sportsnet tonight. So we're doing three things today. So we're spending all day together.
This is our equivalent of like a road trip, like a long road trip, and the stereo's broken.
Like shoot around into lunch, into a game that night. So we'll see. Okay. Hopefully we're still friends by the end of today, by like 5 p.m.
The good news for your audience is this is the starting point. So they're going to get the best.
This is the starting point. So we're coming in fresh. We're on great terms. Everything, we're aligned. But the purposes of today's show are I'm going to be doing an updated ranking of the Western Conference. So earlier, back in June, I believe it was June 10th, I did a Western Conference tiers and rankings, and I ranked the West 1 through 15. And at that point, it was early in the NBA Finals and before the draft, before free agency. So I said at some point in July, I was going to do an updated version. It's July 31st, the final day of the month, and we are doing it today. So the only rules for today's tiers and ranking are it has to be a 1 through 15 ranking, and there has to be at least 3 tiers. Whether you want, like I originally, or back in June, I had 6 tiers. I no longer have 6 tiers. It is down to a lower number, which I'm not going to spoil yet. But I know you were joking in our text last night that you wanted to do just one giant tier, and that's how you view the Western Conference. So before we get into the tiers quickly, just like what was your thought process going through this exercise, and how you decided to break these teams up?
Well, I mean, I wanted to have a bit of fun with it, and hopefully the way that I've laid out some of these tiers will underscore my larger point that I think the West is going to be super tight again this year, the way it was last year, and in particular, the teams that I think are the consensus 2 to 3 through, 8 or 9, they're going to be pretty close. And I think in a lot of ways, they're going to be more or less the same level of team. And I think a lot of this is going to come down to health. I mean, once you get in the playoffs, that's matchups, but that's different than what we're talking about in terms of the 82 games and how those play out. I think a lot of that is really going to come down to health because, for example, the Lakers have made, I think, pretty good moves this offseason, especially considering the limited resources that they had in terms of assets and cap space. But there can be question marks about DeAndre Ayton or Marcus Smart or Jake LaRavia. I also think, though, that every team that is roughly in the same tier range as them, you can find question marks with their moves as well. Like I even a team like Houston, I think there are some interesting questions to be asked about them. So again, I think it's going to be a pretty tight West, which means it's going to be a pretty fun season.
My top line takeaway is similar. I think the top 7, and for me, there's a clear top 7. It's just a bloodbath. And you could tell me any of those 7 teams wins 50 games next season. You could tell me any of those 7 teams makes the conference finals. For a couple of them, maybe I think it would be tough to see them making the finals, but you could, I guess, envision a scenario in which one of these 7 makes the finals. So I think like just the top of the West is as deep, in my opinion, as it's ever been. And all these teams have a guy that's in that conversation for like a top 10 player in the league. And some of them have a second player in that tier or close to it. So like, I just think this is as stacked of a top 6 or 7 in the West as we've seen in quite some time. And again, I would not be surprised. Like you could have 7 teams when we've seen it a decade ago or so where there was a stretch in the West where we'd have 7-8 teams win 50 plus games. And I think that's in play for next season. So you are the esteemed guest, so I will defer to you. What's your tier 1? How many teams are in it? And it sounds like you're naming your tiers. So what is the name of your tier 1?
I only have a couple that are specifically named, but my tier 1 is Oklahoma City. And that's it, just out of respect that they are the defending champion. And they were also the best team in the NBA by a pretty wide margin last year. And they lost nobody of importance. And they actually locked up their big 3. And I think that's really important because especially in this era of this new CBA where there's so much conversation about how long can teams stay together because of money. And, eventually you're not going to be able to pay star player X, and that becomes a point of contention. That's out of the way now. They've got Shea, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren all locked up. Does that mean that they will stay together for the next 5 to 10 years? No questions asked. No. But heading into this season where this pretty young team is going to be looking to defend a title for the first time, none of them have ever experienced it before other than Alex Caruso. I think it is good to have that question put to bed. So at least you can't start getting into that storyline because it's dead. It's settled.
Agreed. So I actually but agreed on your points, not agreed on tier 1. My tier 1 is OKC and Denver. Okay. And at the end, I want to revisit how my rankings changed, but I will just touch on this now. Denver was not a tier, so when I did it in early June, I had OKC by themselves tier 1. Denver has ascended to me into that tier 1 status with OKC. So for me, this tier is championship co-favorites, not Western Conference co-favorites, championship co-favorites. I think those are the 2 best teams in the NBA. I think they're on a collision course. Depending on seeding, could be the second round or the conference finals, and whoever wins that series to me is going to be my favorite, projecting out obviously into May. But I think Denver had I'll take a step back and focus on OKC. To your point, nothing changed. And the craziest thing with them to me is that looking at their top 11 guys, they have 2 guys who are above 27 in Alex Caruso and Kenrich Williams. And Kenrich Williams is a fringe rotation player. So all these guys could still be getting better. They're not even yet in their physical primes necessarily. I expect Shea to continue to rise at least a little bit. But J-Dub and Chet, if those guys, already J-Dub just made 13 All-NBA. I think he's a fringe top 15 guy, especially with some of the injuries to Tatum and Halliburton and whatnot. If he ascends to another level and he's a top 10 guy at some point, and then Chet is also in that top 20, top 15 conversation. You're just talking about going back a decade plus with KD and Russ and Harden, and obviously they're different types of players, and that was more 3 alphas. I don't know if this is quite the same situation here, but they all complement each other fairly well. It's basically a big, a wing, and a guard, and this is I think the start of something special where they're not infallible, right? We saw that during the Denver series. We saw that in the finals against Indiana. But I think if they continue to get better and they still have all these assets to improve the roster, and if there are some injuries or some flaws, some holes in their championship defense, they can make a significant upgrade going into the 2026 deadline. Now, I say Denver because I just think, I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you think about this. I think if Denver, forget the Cam Johnson MPJ swap. I think if Denver just had Jonas Valanciunas, Bruce Brown, and Tim Hardaway Jr. on their bench in that second round series against OKC, I think they win that series. They blew game 4 and game 5. They had double-digit leads in the fourth quarters of both of those games, and they were just running on fumes basically with the starters plus Russ, plus occasionally Peyton Watson, and they could barely field a 7-man rotation similar to the Lakers. But I think if you give Valanciunas as even a 6 to 8 minute a night backup center, and that's on the conservative side, Tim Hardaway Jr. is just a heat check gunner off the bench, and then Bruce Brown, who I still like, and we'll see if he can recapture his mojo in Denver. I think that's better than what they had, and they were so close already to beating OKC that I think this, and then to say nothing of the Cam Johnson swap, I think they're right there with them. And to me, it's probably a 51-49 thing where I slightly lean OKC.
Now, in responding to this, do you want me to reveal where I have Denver in my tier, or should I hold off until I get there?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay.
No, more so. But what do you think about OKC versus Denver? I guess would be.
I would still.
my
I
question
still
for
think.
you.
I still think OKC is way more talented. Nikola Jokic is the best player, I think, still of any player on either team. But I think once you start breaking down the talent involved on each team and how well they work together, the amount of two-way presence, I just think OKC is at a completely different level than Denver. That's not to say, by the way, that Denver couldn't find a way to beat them, because they went to 7 games in the previous series and all of that stuff. But especially as OKC presumably gets better, I think their ceiling and space to get better is much higher and much wider than Denver's ability to get better. If anything, Denver has more players that you have to worry about descending or running into the injury issues of Jamal Murray, or the aging of Aaron Gordon. Cam Johnson, for all the focus on Michael Porter Jr.'s availability, Cam Johnson's been available less. I'm not as sold on the Cam Johnson move as a lot of people. I'm not as sold on Cam Johnson as a player as a lot of people. He's good, don't get me wrong. He's a good player. I don't think he is quite the difference maker that a lot of people are making him out to be. I think some of this is just the byproduct of Michael Porter Jr. being a very polarizing player and kind of having a polarizing personality to a lot of people. But I'm not, and Bruce Brown, it's a fun story for him to come back. The truth is, he has not looked like that player in quite a while. Like, he is seen as a bargain.
It's been a couple of years, yeah.
I was going to say, he's seen like a bargain for a veteran's minimum player, but the truth is, he's also performed lately like a veteran's minimum player. Like, not even a bargain for one, like actually a veteran's minimum player. And his availability has been really sketchy. So is he more helpful than I think some of the other guys they had on the bench before? Probably. But do I think he is as helpful as they're going to need him to be? I'm not sold yet.
That's fair. I think for me with Cam Johnson versus MPJ, it's more of a variance thing where I think MPJ's ceiling is higher than Cam Johnson. Like when MPJ, the Lakers have seen it firsthand. He had a 10 for 10 game against them a couple of years ago.
Rui probably still has PTSD about guarding MPJ during that series. It's roasted him.
It's like against the Lakers, he's the greatest shooter of all time. But like his ceiling is like he's in that. I think Steph deserves to be in his own tier of just there's nothing like when Steph's on fire. You could put MPJ, I think, against and maybe peak Clay, right? But we haven't really seen that for a bit. But like he could put him against anyone else in the league when he is on fire, and just he is trailing into just catch and shoot threes. It doesn't matter if there's a defender there. Like he's kind of got that like Kevin Durant, just can get his shot up against anybody. And when he's on fire or when he's hot, it's special. I think the issue is the floor, and I think we saw that at times in that OKC series. Obviously, he was dealing with the shoulder injury, and but like I think Cam Johnson to me is a more stable player where you're not going to get as many high highs, but you're also not going to get as low lows. I also think he's a much smarter player in my opinion, a bit of a better ball handler, passer, like can just kind of keep the offense flowing. And then defensively, he's not a stopper defensively, but he's not as much of a liability. Like MPJ was someone that despite his length and size, you could target and you could, like you would see the Lakers would target him, but other teams would target him in crunch time and stuff. And sometimes they had to make offense defense substitutions. I don't think Cam Johnson is that level of a defensive liability. So I think he just gives them a more stable presence. And then the depth, like Jonas Valanciunas, I didn't like as the Lakers' potential starting center, but as a backup center, that's fine.
Side note, I think the fact that Valanciunas was looking to go back to Greece rather than be Jokic's backup, I think demonstrates why, when people were mad at Rob Pelinka that he somehow didn't manage to convince Jonas Valanciunas to come to the Lakers. I'm like, why would he? My reaction at the time was, why would he want to? Like, what? It's not an appealing situation for Jonas Valanciunas. It might be appealing for Anthony Davis. I guess, in his own head to have Valanciunas there. But from Valanciunas' perspective, at the time, I was like, what's the appeal? Like, there's going to be a decided cap on how often he's going to play.
And that's the situation he, I guess, begrudgingly accepted.
He proved me right. Jonas proved me right.
I just didn't think he was that good. And so when there was talks about, Gabe Vincent plus some type of asset for first, like LeBron taking a pay cut to use the non-taxpayer MLE for him, I thought was insane. But then when it was like Gabe plus some type of asset for Valanciunas, I was like, I don't think he moves the needle enough. I don't think people have watched his pick and roll defense. But you mentioned, so OKC is the only team in your tier 1. So I'm going to assume Denver's in your tier 2. Are they the first team in your tier 2, or where do you have them ranked in the West?
This is where Jovan, we get to my specialty tiers, because to emphasize how I think really the West starts bunching up a lot, and these teams are all pretty damn close to each other. My tier 2 has its own tiers within the tier, and tier 2,
tierception.
Yes, this is tierception. I have like a nesting, like the Russian nesting dolls of tiers, and there's tiers inside the tiers inside the tiers. But my tier 2.0, or I guess you could just call it tier 2, the beginning of it, is Houston. It's a nasty defense to begin with. They lost Dylan Brooks, and I actually think for all of the Dylan the villain jokes that are easy and fun to make and the shot selection, I think he will actually be missed at times. He is
I've made plenty of those jokes.
Yeah, I have too. They're fun to make. But he is actually a pretty damn good defender and a pretty useful guy along those lines. And his shot selection at times will still be kind of like, what the F, dude? But he also was reasonably efficient, if nothing else, from behind the arc last year at a pretty good volume. And I think that'll be missed at times. But they have so many young, athletic, tenacious defenders and a coach in Ime Udoka who really knows how to build a defense. I'm concerned that when Fred VanVleet is out, the offense could still be kind of choppy. Like, I know KD is the ultimate safety valve offensively, but the more you keep having to release that valve, the more indicative it is that things are getting kind of messy. And depending on how often you have to go to that well, that could be pretty exhausting for a guy that's turning 37. So I think one of their younger guys needs to really step up and develop as an offensive facilitator, hub, something like that, whether you're talking about Alperen Şengün from the front court, or maybe Amin Thompson developing. Maybe it's Reed Shepherd, who I think they're going to be leaning on to play more, and I think it matters if he can handle it. I also think, too, it's going to be really interesting to see, for all of Kevin Durant's undeniable brilliance, we're starting to see a track record of teams getting worse with KD, not better. And to be clear, I'm not saying that this is Kevin Durant's fault. I'm just saying Kevin Durant has not been the elevator, the elevation that would be naturally assumed for a guy that is still as good as him. And I do question his ability to lead teams through different pockets of adversity. So I think that'll be something to watch with Houston. But Houston is my 2.0. My 2.1, tier 2.1, is actually Denver, along with Minnesota. Those are my tier 2.1.
So to be clear, Houston's in their own tier within tier 2.
Yeah, they're in their own tier, but 2.0 versus 2.1. These are very, very small incremental differences, which is to sort of prove my point. Just Houston's depth, I think, is pretty insane. Denver, we talked about them already, and Minnesota are my 2.1. The Wolves are really good, man. And I think you can make an argument that Anthony Edwards is the best two-way player in the league. Like, I think most people would say Giannis, and fine, but I think Ant has a real legit place in that conversation, and he's just turning 24. Like, he just keeps getting better and better and better.
Younger than Dalton Connect.
And like,
as the memes say.
I know. I think the memes are a little bit misleading, but nonetheless, like, he and Julius Randle started, I think, developing better chemistry as the season went along. They're going to miss Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but if any of the young kids, in particular, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. could be the guy that pops. I think they're going to be fine. Dante DiVincenzo really started looking more comfortable in the second half of the season. And Chris Finch is a really good coach. And I know everybody hates Rudy Gobert, but the bottom line is they have been much better since they made that trade. Like the trade has justified itself. Like they've been a good team.
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back conference finals, and they were the only team other than OKC in the West to be top 10 in both offense and defense. And they had that. I mean, I think they closed some. It was something crazy, like 24-3 or something to close the season with Julius Randle in the lineup. Maybe probably off with the record, but something insane where it was like once Julius started to figure things out, they just took off to close the regular season, and then that went obviously into another conference finals for them. So I do not have tierception going with my tier 2. My tier 2 is, to quote you from last night, one giant tier of this is Western Conference Finals contenders. So again, I think there's a top 7, and I think any of these 5 teams are a threat to potentially make the Western Conference Finals, depending on how the brackets break up. I've been saying for like the past year or so that Western Conference is a giant game of rock, paper, scissors, and it really just comes down to how you match up with certain teams. And I think the Lakers ran into that in round 1, not having a playable center. But for me, tier 2 is Houston, Minnesota, the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. So I have Houston at 3, Minnesota at 4, the Lakers at 5, the Clippers at 6, and the Warriors at 7. And I guess for me, the way I view this is like confidence in potentially getting out of the West. And that's where, again, I have Houston at post KD trade, Minnesota back-to-back conference finals, and the Lakers with an improved, I think, starting lineup and bench. The Clippers, I think, also really improved. I just think there's some, oldest team in NBA history, and there's some real just age regression and injury concerns with that group. But if they do stay healthy, I think that I could be too low on them. And then Golden State is just in this stalemate right now with the Kuminga situation, and they've been linked to Al Horford and Anthony Melton and Seth Curry. And do they land any of those guys, or how does this Kuminga situation play out? But just quick thoughts on Houston. I'm with you in their ceiling. I still think the defense I'm very confident in. The offense, I think like Amen Thompson has to make a leap. I also think they have now they have the depth to, I think, figure this out, but I still think like Şengün and Van Vliet are ideally in their closing lineup or their best lineup, but those two guys are entry points into their defense, and they can put some pretty good defenders in the other 3 spots, to be clear. But when you have a 6'1", if we're being generous, point guard and a defensively limited center, that does, I think, allow teams to target those guys in pick and rolls, or just, if they're switching or whatever. So I think they have this, and we saw it. The example I constantly reference is like that game against the Lakers. I want to say it was in maybe late February or March or so. They ended up benching Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green for most of the fourth quarter and just went with a switch everything all wing lineup. And they can do that if necessary, but obviously Şengün's their second best player. So I think that's just like, they have some offense defense choices that I don't know some of the other top West teams have to make. And then Minnesota, to your point, like again, back-to-back Western Conference Finals, top 10 on both sides of the ball. I do think they're going to miss Na, and I don't have them up right now for us, but I'm making these cards of just each team's additions and losses and their projected starters and rotation. And looking at Minnesota's rotation, it's like once you get past the top 7, now you're in this Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark, Rob Dillingham zone that I think those guys all have upside, and one of them could certainly pop next year. And
I think Shannon could really, in the series,
I like Shannon.
In the series against the Lakers, like he didn't play a lot, but every time he played, I kept wondering, why is he not playing more? Like he looked really good in there, and he's really good. He had a great summer
in his role. Yeah,
he also had a.
I like him.
Yeah, he looks like of those 3 guys that you mentioned, he looks like he's not just the readiest, but the guy that I think could contribute most on both sides of the ball.
I think Dillingham's the one that's interesting to me too, just because obviously the pedigree of like, that's a lottery pick who should top 10 pick who is supposed to kind of be that instant offense off the bench. And they don't really have, I mean, like Naz Reid and Dante can do that. We've seen them do that, but like those guys are, I think, more reliant on Ant or Mike Conley setting them up and creating for them. Rob Dillingham is a guy who can create his own shot. And if we're looking at, like, he could be the third best shot creator potentially on this team once he starts to get into his groove, just behind Ant and Randall. I think my concerns with Minnesota, I do think the loss is a big loss, and someone's going to have to step in to, because I just think that a bulletproof top 8. And then Gobert and Conley are starting, Conley's already in his late 30s. Gobert is in early to mid 30s. So there could be some regression at some point with either one of those guys where Conley is, to me, starting to look more like a bench guard rather than a starting guard. And Gobert is starting, I think, to hit a little bit of a different point of his career. So that would be the only real concern for me with Minnesota. But Ant could be the MVP next year. Like, I know we're going to talk about Luka and what he could do, but Ant very well could lead this team to 55 wins and his first MVP.
It wouldn't shock me if Conley ended up getting moved to the bench, and even if Rob Dillingham isn't ready for that role, if you moved in like Dante DiVincenzo, who can move the ball well enough, and you've already got a lot of playmaking between Ant and Julius Randle on the floor. I think between the three of them, you don't have like a true point guard, but maybe you have you just have enough of it, and you've got enough like offensive talent, enough movement, enough shooting that you can make this work even if it's not as traditional.
So my fifth team is the Lakers. Are they your fifth team? And
yes, they are.
Are they in your tier 2.2?
They are at the top, Jovan, of tier 2.2. Okay. That would be the Lakers, then the Clippers, then the Warriors. But the tier
okay, 2.2. So we have the exact, other than Houston, and we have Houston and Denver flipped, but otherwise we have the same top 7.
Yeah, they are number 5, and they are at the top of tier 2.2 for me.
So make the case.
I think they improved this offseason. The biggest glaring hole during the playoffs was center, and DeAndre Ayton. Even if DeAndre Ayton does not improve one single thing on the list of bad habits that people detract against him, he will be a massive upgrade over Jackson Hayes because he's just better than him. Like, there's no world in which he's not better than Hayes. And that makes a really big difference. I think bringing in Marcus Smart allows them to try to find more balance in the starting 5. Like, there's been too much offensive focus in the starting 5 and not enough defensive presence. And I think also too much redundancy in the defensive assignments. Between LeBron, Luka, Rui, and in certain respects now Ayton, you have too many guys who guard too many of the same players. And I think bringing in Marcus Smart, even if he's not who I would start ahead of Rui, even if he's not the point of attack defender that he was during his like defensive player of the year prime, he is still more suitable for guards and smaller wings, those type of assignments than anybody they had in there before. I think you rebalance that starting 5 more. I think bringing in Rui off the bench will actually help balance a bench group that was really starved for scoring. I think Jake LaRavia could be a potentially sneaky pickup for this team. I think just more time with LeBron and skinny Luka and Austin together in a training camp under JJ Redick, who will be more experienced moving forward. Like, there was, as great as it was to get Luka last year, and there's no downside whatsoever for that trade having happened, there was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot that needed to be figured out on the fly that I think ultimately they both didn't have enough players for it. And I think JJ during the playoffs overthought a lot of stuff and kind of panicked and went galaxy brain in a few places. And overall, I think JJ cut off more options than he actually had. Like, I understand he had some imperfect ones, but at some point, if you're unwilling to go anywhere that isn't perfect or pretty close to perfect, you're just limiting your options too much. But I think JJ will grow from it. And I think the team having the benefit of starting this season with more depth and with Luka and LeBron in particular together with JJ, I think it's going to make a really big difference.
The Lakers were the toughest team for me to rank in this whole process. And I don't know if it's because I'm the closest to them and that can influence you in either direction. But I the thing I've been trying to grapple with all summer is like, which team is this? And I don't think we have an answer yet, obviously, until we see what they look like with Ayton and Laravia and Marcus Smart. But I think like there's the team that won 50 games and had a slew of statement wins. Like I've said, they basically had a win against every notable team other than Cleveland, who they just played twice early in the season. So they didn't even have a shot to beat Cleveland, but they beat Boston, they beat New York, they beat OKC, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas, the Clippers, like go down the list, Golden State. They beat every notable team in the Luka era or like right before the Luka era and had all these statement wins and performances. They had the stretch of going 20-4, best defense in the league, but then they shit the bed in the playoffs. Like there's really no other way. And we could say it was the close 5-game series, and if Luka doesn't get sick or if the LeBron foul doesn't happen or whatever, but like we've kind of had the same discourse with the Lakers postseason performance for 3 straight seasons, where the Denver series was close sweep, the Denver series was a close gentleman's sweep, and then the Minnesota series was a close gentleman's sweep. And like there's always been some type of excuse or hurdle for this group in these playoff series that they're close, but they just can't get over the hump. And I do think this roster is more versatile and deeper and younger. And I have more confidence in this group going into this season than I did in any of the last 3 seasons, probably since the title defense season. I would say like this is the best opening night roster. So that's encouraging. But I also look at some of the metrics that I'm like, yes, they were 50-32. They were tied with Denver and the Clippers for the 3 seed. They won because of the tiebreaker. But one thing in going through this exercise and looking at all the other teams, the 7 teams that I consider legit threats to at least make the Western Conference Finals, if not finals, all of them had top 10 ratings, net ratings, except for the Lakers. And all of them were top 10 on one side of the ball, except for the Lakers. And there's like this identity component still where at times in the Luka era, they were actually better defensively than offensively, but that didn't quite jive with the actual talent on the floor. And just looking at LeBron, Luka, and Austin together, you should walk into a top 10 offense just with those 3, if not closer to a top 5 offense. And we just never saw that from them. So I think there's this element of like, I don't know quite like, could this just be a team that's good in the regular season, goes 52-30 and then loses in the first or second round? Like, I don't really know how I feel about that right now. But to me, comparing them to like the Clippers and Minnesota in particular, it was really hard to kind of sift through that and determine who I think's better.
I mean, the margins, I think, between all these teams are really, really close. I mean, I don't know if there is a right answer, and I don't even know if there is a right answer once we see things play out, because again, things can be really close. Like I know the Lakers lost 2 seasons in a row to Denver, but in the second of those series, there were two Jamal Murray buzzer beating game winners.
Yeah.
The Lakers led the overwhelming majority of the minutes in that series, which again, doesn't mean that, you should look at the series outcome differently. They lost. My point is just these margins are so close that very small factors can flip them. And I think sometimes the answer is just they're really close and it becomes really impossible to predict what's going to send things in one direction or another. Like what you were mentioning, though, with LeBron and Luka and Austin, and I think now you bring in DeAndre Ayton. This is my big argument for you either start Marcus Smart, or if JJ can find the confidence to do it, you start Vando to bring in some type of defensive balance and more versatility. And if you bring up the idea of Marcus Smart's shooting limitations or all the stuff with Vando offensively, my thought is just if you can't find enough offense with Luka, LeBron, Austin, and DeAndre Ayton out there, then something either schematically doesn't work, it sounds better on paper than it is in reality. But like those four guys alone should handle your offense. Like if it falls apart because you don't have Rui out there spacing the floor, something doesn't work. Because I think at this point, we'll have seen enough of it to know like it just sounds better than for whatever reason it is in reality.
So the Vando thing is interesting because I know a lot of fans want him to start, and my pushback to that, not even against him potentially starting, just more so looking at the reality of the situation of he played 36 games last year and he only played over 20 minutes in 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And he didn't play over 20 minutes in a playoff game. And if you actually look at this, I went through the box score and just remembering what the context of the situation. In 5 of those 6 games, they were without a starter, and often a front court starter. So there was circumstances that led to his season high was 29 minutes against Boston, and that was no Jackson Hayes. He was out that game. So Vando started, and they went with like the small ball look, and then that was the game LeBron got injured. So then Vando also had to play more to close that game. So I just don't think JJ trusts him, and clearly, like he wasn't part of that 5-man unit. And if you look at a majority of his games, he was a 12 to 18 minute a night guy. So I think that's the role that JJ envisions for him. So I just don't see him really being in the starting mix. I'm with you though, Marcus Smart. Like I've been making that case. I think Rui, there's too much duplication. Sometimes offensively as well, but certainly on the defensive end.
I think Rui's going to get lost offensively in the starting lineup. Like
I agree. Like he's the 5th option now,
right?
And he's never really been.
They didn't get him enough shots. They didn't get him enough shots last year with Jackson Hayes as the starting center, or like sometimes even with DFS, who's basically a catch and shoot guy. They didn't get Rui enough shots. Like I think in this starting lineup, you're going to be counting on Rui to do more of the little things and less of the scoring. And I like Rui. Like I'm a proponent of him. Rui's not a little things player. Like Rui is very much a big things player. Like he's not out there to provide the intangibles. He's out there to provide the tangibles. And if you're not going to get the tangibles from him, you're not getting the best use of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I mean, I guess he's been the 5th option before when they had like AD and D'Lo starting with Austin and LeBron. But I think he did look, in my opinion, better when it was like Jackson Hayes and Max Christie out there next to him, and those guys providing some of the little things with their defense and their length, and then him being a little bit more propped up offensively is more like the 3rd option.
Yeah, but
still probably not as involved as he would like. I think you said at the top that you lean Marcus over Rui, and that's how you do it. Like that's how I think that's the answer, and then you stagger the rotation to get Vando out there in certain shifts, Gabe Vincent out there in certain shifts, and you're figuring out, you're trying to balance the offense and defense. But it is going to be something interesting. Let's quickly touch on the Clippers and Warriors, and then I think we could breeze through the rest of the West because I don't think it's as interesting. But I will say the Clippers were the hardest one for me because I think, similar to the Lakers, they are. I think there are some questions, right? And they also lost in the first round. I think you could argue they upgraded even more than the Lakers did with John Collins, Bradley Beal, and Brook Lopez. I just think those 3 players are straight up better than Ayton, Smart, and LaRavia. Again, Bradley Beal on a $50 million deal, bad. Bradley Beal on an $11 million deal, like he did average 17, 4, and 4 last year. So I think, and those are like, they needed a better backup center. They did not. It was Drew Eubanks as their backup center. So Drew Eubanks to Brook Lopez is a major upgrade. Then inserting John Collins, like in general, they just didn't have a lot of size, mainly a wing heavy team. So now John Collins, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, I think that really helps. And then again, Beal just as like a gamble. I think that is someone who could, depending on the role, like really help them. So they're like, I think if we were talking to the national media and just polling them, I think most people would have the Clippers ahead of the Lakers. I know ESPN just dropped their power rankings. They had the Lakers 7th at the bottom of this tier, and Golden State and the Clippers ahead of them. So with the Clippers and to a lesser extent Golden State, I think they're just like this mystery box right now with not knowing what's going to happen with Kuminga and their free agency. Like, why did you have the Lakers ahead of those two teams, and how do you view those two teams in comparison?
I'll reiterate again, really, really tight. Like, if somebody has the Clippers or even the Warriors ahead of the Lakers, I might not agree, but I'm not going to argue much because I think the differences are so small. There's no right or wrong answer. The Clippers, my simple thing is I need to see it. Like, the Clippers have been the ultimate on paper team for like the last 4 or 5 years. And they've had
it's the whole Kawhi era, basically.
Yeah. And they've had very predictable injuries. And now with James Harden, very predictable playoff struggles. And I don't mean this in like a Clippers going to clip type of thing. Like, I think they're a really well-run organization. I respect the way they handle a lot of their business. And I agree with you that the moves that they made this offseason, if nothing else on paper, make them a better team. But Bradley Beal has the exact same injury concerns as the other major players on this team. They have often been disinclined to take the regular season all that seriously to begin with, which makes it tricky to figure out their tiering in all of this stuff, because I actually think your regular season matters, in building the habits and turning into the team that you want to be, but also in getting yourself the seeding that will potentially set you up for the best run in the playoffs. And the Clippers, whether you want to say out of necessity or out of philosophical outlook or whatever, they haven't been inclined to treat the regular season with much urgency. And I think they really need to if they're going to get the best version out of themselves. And again, I need to see them do this stuff because they've been getting, frankly, they've been getting a benefit of the doubt over the last 4 or 5 years that the Lakers never do. And I don't mean to like get my back up as like somebody who's both a Laker podcaster and a Laker fan IRL. Like, I'm not being defensive about this, but just every year they get a benefit of the doubt for their additions that the Lakers never seem to. Often for, LeBron's getting old. Well, look at these other guys LeBron keeps playing more games than. Like, at some point, I need to see the Clippers actually do the stuff that everybody thinks they are capable of. And I understand why people think they're capable of it, but they need to do it. So until they do it, I'm like, okay, all right, fine. Like, I'll see the season and then I'll decide what they did. The Warriors, like you mentioned, they're in this stalemate, and the Kuminga thing, like, they're in a really rough place right now because it's very clear he does not want to be there anymore. And it's very clear that they would prefer he not be there, but they can't just give him away for nothing. But because they've screwed up this whole situation with him, they've completely lowered the value that they could have gotten for him a couple years ago. If they keep him around, I think that is going to be a really awkward cloud hanging over them. Maybe they flip him for some type of value in a sign and trade, but for the time being, it doesn't seem like they're going to get a lot. So either outcome does not look great for them. I know they're attached to Al Horford and D'Anthony Melton. I like Melton, but he's coming off a major ACL injury, and he missed a lot of time the season before that. Al Horford's, I believe, turning 40. And according to Mark Spears from ESPN and Anscape, was debating retirement. So I'm not as sold as a lot of people that he's going to be the addition that they think he's going to be. Like, because for me, anytime player other than maybe LeBron, because LeBron is playing at such a high level that when he, I think, legitimately does consider retirement at the end of every season, he's his own category because he's still so effing good. But Al Horford, you're seeing the slippage, and he's debating retirement. I'm not sure he's going to be quite the difference maker everyone makes him out to be. And then in the meantime, your core with Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, they can be really good. I know the numbers when Steph and Jimmy have played together, but that's a lot of aging concerns. Jimmy misses a lot of regular season games as it is. Like, they're a team with, I think, you can picture a high ceiling for them, but you can also picture the foundation cracking altogether and just completely, the bottom completely falling out. Like, I think a lot depends on Brandon Podziemski. I think they really need him to take a very significant and consistent leap moving forward. Like, I think it's really, really important that maybe he doesn't play at an all-star level, but he starts playing at a level that really raises people's eyebrows, because otherwise I think there's just too much burden in the hands of a lot of older players.
And I think the two big things you just touched on that for me are the reason to have the Lakers above the Warriors. The Warriors are about to have, like, their star trio is 35 and older. I think even about to be 36 and older, depending on birthdays.
Steph's going to turn 38 during the season.
And Steph's going to be 38. And then with the Clippers, it's like Kawhi just played 37 games. Now, I will give them, I mean, they won 50 games with Kawhi playing less than half the season, which is pretty crazy. And that's a testament to James Harden and Ivica Zubats. But Harden, we know at this point, like, the playoff history is what it is. And I don't think you want him as your second best player in a playoff series, at least beyond the first round. But even in the first round, maybe you're matched up with a Denver, and then you see what he does in Game 7. And then I get like Lopez. I should have mentioned Chris Paul as an addition for them as well. But like Lopez, Chris Paul, how do these guys hold up? Even John Collins, Bradley Beal. They have extensive injury histories. Nick Batum is another guy they're going to be relying on that's a bit older. So they're the oldest roster in NBA history, and they also aren't the healthiest roster in NBA history. So I think that, like, there's just a lot of variance with them where you could tell me they're the 2 seed and Kawhi plays 60 games like he did 2 years ago, and like they win 56 games and they go to the conference finals. They could also, like, the floor could fall out where Harden regresses to where he was a couple pre-Clippers tenure. Kawhi's injured. Some of these guys are just washed, like a Lopez or Chris Paul or whatever. And this is like a 46-win team that's like 6 or 7 seed. So there's somewhere in, it's probably even low for like maybe like a play-in team. There's somewhere in there, and that's where, like, to your point, everything's close, but you got to split the margin somewhere. And then with Golden State, this is my favorite thing right now, filling out the rotation. You get the starters, which is Draymond, Jimmy, Brandon Podziemski, Buddy Hield, Steph Curry. That was their starting 5 in the playoffs, so they have those guys. But if you take away Jonathan Kuminga, Kevon Looney went to New Orleans, and Gary Payton II looking like he's probably not coming back, but who knows? Right now, their bench is Moses Moody, Chase Jackson-Davis, Quentin Post, Guy Santos, and Kevin Knox. Those are their top 10 players. So
they're jealous of the Lakers bench.
Yeah, I mean, you got, like, okay, so if you put in Horford, you put in Melton, you put in Curry, like, that starts to look a little bit better. But to your point on Horford, he's about to be 40. Like, there's just a lot of risk with that team as well.
Been a really good player for a while. I mean, like,
they completely rely on Steph, and like they need Steph to play 75 games and be completely healthy. And like, you know, Draymond's getting up there, Jimmy's up there. It's just that I would rather trust the 26-year-old superstar in Luka to lead my team than guys in their mid 30s, which Kawhi's 35, Steph's going to be 38. It just comes down to that for me.
When you brought up Buddy Hield, I actually should have mentioned part of the reason that I think it is so important that Brandon Podziemski really take a notable step forward is I feel like if your 4th best player on a team is Buddy Hield, with all of the aging concerns that you have with your top 3 and the burden that you don't want those guys to carry over 82 games unless absolutely necessary, I don't feel good about it if Buddy Hield feels like the 4th best. Like, I feel like it needs to be Brandon Podziemski, again, taking a very, very big step forward. So, you know, we'll see what comes of it. I just, again, with the Clippers, like, if you're asking me if they have some ingredients for a really good cake, the answer is yes, but I'm not going to assume that the cake tastes great. Like, I need to see the cake baked. I need to see it put in front of me. I need a fork. I need to taste it.
Also, it needs to just not be a Game 7. Let's breeze through the rest of the West. So what are the rest of your tiers?
From there, my tier 2.5 were the Spurs and the Mavericks. Tier 3.0 is the Kings, Blazers, and Pelicans. My tier 4.0 was the Jazz. And then I just have a tier that I labeled Hell, and that is the Suns. The Suns
I like
are
that. Not what you sent me over text last night, which I won't repeat, but it's close.
I mean, seriously, like that sounds like the most hellish experience on so many different levels. The atmosphere over there, they have an absolute lunatic in Matt Ishbia as their owner, who has somehow managed, like, I'm willing to believe that he is a better human being than Robert Sarver, because, I mean, the bar to clear that is
it's a low bar.
It's basically underground.
It's basically underground.
Yes. So, I mean,
it's basically in hell.
Yes, it is in hell, like where the suns are, they're here. Like, I'm willing to believe that Matt Ishbia is a better person than Robert Sarver, if for no other reason than low bar to clear, and he's giving me no indications that he's not. That being said, he is thus far a worse owner of a team than Robert Sarver, and that says a lot, because Sarver was terrible. He was considered one of the worst owners in the NBA, and so far I think Matt Ishbia is making him look like Dr. Buss, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, so I have it a little different, because again, I didn't do the tierception, which I'm really jealous of that you came up with.
I think we have a Jovan, I promised you something different.
You did, and you delivered. So I have tier 3. This is play-in teams. For me, it's Dallas, San Antonio, and Memphis. I think that rounds out for me my top 10. And Dallas would make the tier 2 conversation very interesting if Kyrie were healthy and available and not projected to come back on the early side like February, March. And even then, it's hard to anticipate him looking like Kyrie after such a long layoff and such a big injury this late into his career. San Antonio, I think they're, to me, the biggest wild card in the West, where if there's a team in this tier or below the top 7 that just knocks the door down and is like, we're the 4 seed or the 5 seed somehow, and it all just clicks, it's San Antonio with Wemby and Castle and Harper and Vassell and I didn't even mention Fox, who's their second best player. Like, they're just loaded, and they are a bit small on the perimeter. That's like the one thing that they have to kind of figure out is outside of Wemby, I think their next 4 or 5 best players are all like 6'6" and below. So there is a bit of a, it's funny to say a Wemby team has some size concerns, but they do have some size concerns in the non-Wemby portion of the roster. And then Memphis, this is like a sad situation for them where, I mean, you could talk me into them being as high as 8, and I had them as, I think, 8th going into this exercise, like,
that's
back in June, but losing Desmond Bane and just, they're in a weird spot. And if Ja gets back to being Ja, and at this point we've been saying this for like 2-3 straight years, then maybe they ascend into the tier 2 conversation. But for now, I have them at the back end of this tier. And then for me, tier 4 is what's the plan? This is Sacramento, Portland, Phoenix, and New Orleans in that order. Sacramento, I did not get the Schroeder signing, and they're a team they're going to have a lot of like 130 to 125 games. They can't defend anybody, but they can light it up. And Sabonis, Levine, DeRozan, that's a trio that could each drop 25 on any given night, but they're also going to give up 25, 30 points on the other end each. Then Portland, they're like kind of going for it, but I just don't think they're good enough. I don't even know if, to me, they don't have a clear top 2 player on a championship team. I don't even know if any of these guys can be a top 3 player on a championship team as constructed. Like, Denny Avdia is interesting, and he has really grown the last couple of years. And like, I think he's a really good player, a high level starter. I don't know if he's a top 3 guy on a title team. And then you get into like Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson. And I like what they're building in general, but I still think they're missing a couple of the key pieces that, like, they have a nice supporting cast, but they don't really have that primary guy. And I guess we'll see how Dame recovers, but that's a next season conversation. Phoenix, I guess I'm a little bit higher on them than you are, having them 13th overall, but this roster is horrible, and I'm not a Jalen Green guy. I just, like, they don't have a bench, and it's really bad. New Orleans is also a wild card, I guess, if they could get healthy, but they're just never healthy. But I like Zion. I like Trey Murphy. I like Herb Jones. DeJounte Murray maybe comes back at the end of the season. They got Jordan Poole. They got Misi, who I really like. They got Derek Queen, although he got injured. So they're like a cursed team that can just never stay healthy. And it seems like they're due for a chaotic season once again. But I guess they could be the top of this tier if things click, and they got the most talent for sure, in my opinion. And then Utah is tier 5 by themselves, tanking for AJ DeBunsa and the BYU star, who's a projected number 1 pick. So before we get out of here, just quick notes on my movers and fallers. So I had Denver go up from tier 2 with just Minnesota previously to now tier 1 with OKC. Houston went up 4 spots for me. I had them 7th pre-KD trade. They jumped up to 3. Portland went up a couple spots, 14 to 12. And then fallers were Golden State, 4 to 7. Minnesota, Memphis, and Phoenix all dropped a couple spots due to losing Na, losing Bane, and losing KD and Beal. Anything with the movers or fallers of just how the West has changed over the last 6-7 weeks?
Again, I think the West is just a bitch. It's going to be a bitch this entire season. Even some of the lower teams,
this is the social clip. This is the pull quote from the episode.
I hope so. Even a team like Sacramento, that we could both be like, what the F are they doing over there? They're not going to be a walkover, because
I am asking that question, to be clear. I am asking what the F are they doing over there?
So am I. And I've got a few thoughts on all these teams really quick, but one of them with Sacramento is I've decided that Domantas Sabonis may be the best player in the league that I don't think you can build a team around, because he is really good and really talented and really unusual. But I don't know if he can be built around, because he is so odd to peg defensively. I have no idea really what his even relatively best position or use is defensively, and offensively. As much talent as he has as a scorer and a facilitator and a rebounder, I think he is difficult to figure out exactly who to put next to him for the spacing concerns that particularly a high offense team like the Kings they need, because the defense isn't there. So I just think he might be the league's best weird player. And I really like him as a player. I just don't know if he can be built around, or even where he would fit into the hierarchy of an elite team, it's a shame, because again, I think he's really talented. Wemby, I think there's going to be a really interesting thing with San Antonio this year, because they've got talent, but a lot of their talent is unproven. Between the rookies with Dylan Harper and Bryant Carter, Stephon Castle being, just a year under his belt, the fit with De'Aaron Fox and Wemby still obviously has to be figured out, because they barely played together last year.
Played 5 games together.
Right. But
Wemby
is so great. I think a lot of their success is going to be a test, and we're going to learn this, of how much Wemby at this early stage of his career is capable of papering over in terms of problems. How much gets solved just by having Wemby out there, I think is going to be a really interesting test for this year. New Orleans is basically an A-list version of the Island of Misfit Toys. You look at their roster and it's not that they have no talent, but it just doesn't seem to work, and it seems like it's never going to work. Portland, when you mentioned they're going for it, but they're not quite good enough, I think they're going for it, but what I think they're actually going for more than wins is building culture. I think right now they're an extremely expensive culture build at the moment, and I don't think that they made the moves, particularly with Drew and Dame, with the idea of this is going to lead to 15 more wins. I think it's more, this is going to turn the young guys that we believe in into the team that we think could be championship contenders in 5 years. This is basically a long play towards what they think is going to be the best version of the young players that they commit to. And then finally with Dallas, I think they're going to learn, and something that I think the Lakers knew inside the front office, and this is one of the few areas where I've been in absolute lockstep with them. I think Dallas is going to learn that Anthony Davis is a far better center than he is power forward. And they are set up a lot for AD to play minutes at the 4, which is, I know, what he wants. I don't think it's going to work, in part because Anthony Davis is so much better as a 5 than he is a 4. And I think the efforting required to build a roster that could even sort of justify playing him more at the 4, I don't think is worth it at all. And I think it's one of the things that the Lakers, I think we're having a difficult time trying to figure out what to do. I think they recognized, and Jeannie Buss kind of said a little bit too much in that one interview where she said Anthony Davis was complaining about his position. I think they recognized internally, we are not going to be able to make him happy because he really wants to do something that doesn't really make sense.
Mm-hmm. All good points. I think the only thing with the thinking through anything we might have missed, like I do think it's worth mentioning with the Lakers, like we didn't talk about Luka and just like the upside there of if he is the MVP next season. Like in theory, if you're an MVP, you're on at least a top 5 seed, if not probably a top 4 seed. And Luka, I mean, that's again where I get back to just it's difficult for me to place the Lakers. Like I had them fifth in early June and I have them fifth right now, but it's fifth with again this variance of like I think more so than any of the other teams in that top 7. There's this variance of they could even be the 2 seed potentially, but they could also be the 7 seed. And like LeBron has to stay healthy. He also has to stay. Like I thought he was a top 10 player this past year. I think if he slips from the 7th or 8th best player maybe to like the 17th, it's not a big slip, but it does impact. It matters, right? So can Austin take another step? What happens? Like can Rui has, I think, gotten better each of the last couple of years. Can he continue to improve? How does DeAndre Ayton fit? How much left does Marcus Smart have in the tank? Can Jake LaRavia be a rotation level guy on a team with real expectations? Because we've seen it in Memphis, it was largely injury related and circumstance related. And then he did pop that second half of the season in Sacramento, but Sacramento is, again, we don't even know what's going on over there. So like there are some questions with the Lakers to be cleared, but you mentioned with Wemby papering over things, like Luka could be the ultimate paper mache guy where it's just, if Luka goes back to being 2024 Luka in Dallas, he's averaging 32, 33 a night, 8-9 rebounds, 8-9 assists, and is in that MVP conversation, top 3 player in the league. That alone could be 50 plus wins, regardless of some of the other questions or circumstances with the Lakers. And that could lead to, I think, this team overachieving. Because I think right now, and just I've done a lot of power rankings research and seeing the Vegas odds and stuff, the Lakers are by consensus the 5th to 7th best team for most people. And a lot of people have them 6th or 7th. So I think for them to punch above that and to be more in that conversation with a Minnesota or a Houston or maybe even a Denver, I think it's going to have to come from some of these things hitting, right, with Ayton and Smart and whatnot. But also just if Luka's that dude that we've seen him be for most of his career, that's where that closes the gap, I think.
The last thought I would say with the Lakers, and specifically because you brought up Luka, and we've spent so much time, I know you have, and I definitely know I have, on Locked On Lakers, and also Lakers Talk, my weekly Lakers show for 710 ESPN, which Jovan has been kind enough to appear on as a guest a few times, and I'm already enlisting you for future appearances, so be ready. Luka, this transformation physically and the dedication that he put towards it this offseason, beyond the effects that it has for Luka on the court, I also think there's a real possibility, if not inevitability, that it's going to be a let's effing go galvanizing thing for the rest of the team. Because when you see Luka looking like this, first of all, I'm sure his teammates were all like, holy shit. Like, oh my, like I showed my wife and daughter the Men's Health cover. It took them a second to recognize that it was Luka. They were like, wait, that's Luka? Like, I mean, he really looks that much different. And when you see the guy whose team it is, we all know it's Luka's team now. Like, when you see him doing something like this, I think it raises the accountability. I mean, I think it's inspiring and it makes people excited, but it raises the accountability of everybody else to step up something in their own game to match that, in the same way that last year, I think more than Anthony Davis, more than the addition of Dorian Finney-Smith, more than the emergence of Max Christie, yada, 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 defensively, the team changed when LeBron stepped it up and dedicated himself. Because, once the old man is playing defense like that, nobody has an excuse not to. And when he wasn't, there's a permission structure for you to slack yourself. And I think Luka's dedication to conditioning and fitness and leaning out, all that stuff, I think could raise a level of accountability and everybody else feeling obligated to step up their own game in a way that could lead to a better collective version of the Lakers.
Look, he's inspiring me to step up my game. It's been 4 days since that dropped, and I've been fasting. I've been getting my 200 grams of protein. I've worked out 3 of the 4 days. So I'm trying to have the Luka men's health glow up myself.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah. So look, he's already having an impact on the LA area. But Andy, thank you so much for taking. I know we went way over, as we tend to do on Buha's block. 5 minutes turns into an extra 30 minutes here, but I appreciate you. I will see you in a couple of hours, and we will podcast, and then I will see you an hour later, and we will do TV, and I'm looking forward to it. But other than Lockdown Lakers and Lakers Talk and at Cam Brothers on all social channels, anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
You already plugged our Spectrum appearance, so I mean, that's covered. There's nothing really
Check
else.
out Spectrum. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Saturday, likely with some pretty good news to break down. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I'll talk to you then.